The twin suns of Kethmara cast long shadows across the crystal spires of the colony as Commander Velanara stood at the observation deck of the central command tower. Her violet scales caught the morning light as she watched the daily routine of her people below. Children played in the crystal gardens while their parents tended to the energy farms that powered their civilization. It was peaceful, just as it had been for 300 years since the first Zephyrian settlers had arrived on this distant world, but peace was about to shatter. The first alarm came from the outer sensor stations. Lieutenant Kexlin rushed into the command center, his usually calm demeanor replaced by panic. "Commander, we have massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. Multiple ships, more than our sensors can count." Velanara's four eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic display. The approaching fleet was enormous, their ships dark and angular, bristling with weapons. She had seen those designs before. In intelligence reports, her blood turned cold. "Korthic Dominion," she whispered. The Korthic were the nightmare of the galaxy. For 1,000 years, they had swept across star systems, conquering and enslaving entire civilizations. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelming force followed by complete subjugation. No species had ever successfully resisted them for long. "How long until they reach us?" Velanara asked. 6 hours, Commander." "Maybe less." Velanara looked at the tactical display. Kethmara had basic defensive systems, enough to handle pirates or minor threats, but nothing that could stop a Korthic fleet. Their planetary shields would hold for perhaps an hour under bombardment. Their small defense fleet consisted of 12 patrol vessels, hardly enough to slow down the approaching. "Armada, get me a count on the enemy fleet," she ordered. The numbers came back worse than she had feared. 600 warships, including several dreadnoughts. The Korthic had sent enough firepower to level entire star systems. This was not a raid or a reconnaissance mission. This was a full conquest fleet. "Commander," called out communications officer. "Render, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Korthic vessel." The holographic display shimmered and formed the image of General Thakemer, Supreme Commander of the Korthic Third Conquest Fleet. His four eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and his armored form radiated menace even through the projection. "Zephyrian Colony," his voice boomed through the command center, "you will surrender immediately. Your world has been selected for resource extraction. You have 1 hour to evacuate your military installations and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will be met with total destruction." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Velanara stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through their options. Surrender meant slavery for her people. Their children would be sent to work camps. Their culture would be erased, but resistance meant death. "Commander," Render said quietly, "what are your orders?" Velanara straightened her shoulders. "Begin evacuation of all civilians to the underground shelters. Activate planetary shields. And send out a general distress signal on all frequencies." "Commander, with respect, who would respond? The Korthic fleet is too large. Any species that tries to help us will be destroyed." "Send the signal anyway," Velanara ordered. "If we're going to die, let the galaxy know we asked for help." The distress signal that burst across the galaxy was simple, but desperate. "This is Kethmara Colony, Outer Rim Coordinates 77 Alpha. We are under attack by the Korthic Dominion Conquest Fleet. Our defenses are failing. We have civilians, including younglings. Please, anyone who receives this transmission, we need help. We have 6 hours before they reach us." Across the galaxy, the message was received by dozens of species. The elegant Altarians, beings of pure energy who had mastered space travel, before humans had discovered fire, received the transmission in their crystal palaces. Their High Council met in emergency session, their flowing forms pulsing with concern. "The Zephyrians are peaceful people," said Counselor Lyerthane. "They have never harmed anyone." "But the Korthic fleet is too large," replied Counselor Velthane. "We would lose half our fleet trying to save them, and we would still fail." The vote was unanimous. The Altarians would send condolences, but no ships dot the massive, rock-like beings. of the Granite Confederation received the message in their mountain fortresses. General Rockmer, their supreme military commander, studied the tactical data with his officers. 600 ships, he rumbled. We could perhaps match their numbers. But the cost would be enormous. And for what? A single colony on the rim? Sir, his aide ventured, the Zephyrians helped us during the plague wars. They sent medical supplies when our people were dying. Rockmer's stone face showed no emotion. Send them weapons and supplies, that is all we can do. The Aquatic Oceanic Alliance received the message in their underwater cities. The graceful Murthak, who had evolved in the depths of their ocean worlds, discussed the crisis in their flowing musical language. The Korthik will not stop with one colony, warned Admiral Tiderunner. They will come for us all eventually. Then we should preserve our strength for that day, replied the council speaker. We cannot save everyone. One by one, every major species in the galaxy made the same calculation. The Korthik fleet was too large, too powerful. Intervention would mean certain destruction. Each chose to remain silent to preserve their own forces for future threats. But on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, a different kind of response was being prepared. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, reading the translated distress signal for the third time. Around him, his crew of humans waited for orders. The bridge was cramped compared to the elegant vessels of older species, filled with screens and controls that seemed primitive to galactic standards. Sir, said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, his tactical officer, we've confirmed the transmission. Kethmara colony is under attack by a Korthik conquest fleet. 600 ships? Any other species responding? Morrison asked. Negative, sir. Long-range scans show no movement from any allied fleets. Morrison stared out at the stars through the view screen. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. They were still considered newcomers, primitives by many standards. Their technology was inferior, their ships smaller and less sophisticated. But they had something that most species in the galaxy had forgotten over millennia of civilization. Sir, Rodriguez continued, Command is asking for our tactical assessment and recommendation. Morrison looked at his crew. They were young, most of them. Rodriguez was only 28, barely out of the academy. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Mark Davis, was even younger. His engineer, Chief Petty Officer Lisa Thompson, had grown up on a farm before joining the space fleet. Tell me about the colony, Morrison said. Zephyrian settlement, about 2 million people. They're peaceful, never been involved in any conflicts. They have families, children. Rodriguez paused. Sir, the tactical analysis shows that even our entire fleet wouldn't be enough to stop the Korthik. Morrison nodded slowly. He had read the same reports. Humanity's entire space fleet consisted of 37 vessels, most of them smaller than the Korthik destroyers. The odds were not just bad, they were impossible. Sir, called out Communications Officer Tony Williams, we're getting a message from the UES Liberty and the U's Resilience. They're requesting permission to join us. Morrison smiled slightly. Captain Lisa Chun of the Liberty and Captain Danny Walsh of the Resilience were good officers, good people. They had seen the same message he had. Sir, Rodriguez said quietly, what should I tell Command? Morrison looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, families were hiding in shelters, waiting for help that would never come. Children were crying, not understanding why the adults were scared. Parents were trying to be brave while their world fell apart around them. Tell Command we're going, Morrison said quietly, and request immediate departure authorization for any other ships that want to volunteer. Sir, the odds? I know the odds, Lieutenant. But someone asked for help, and we're the only ones who answered. Morrison turned to his crew. I won't order anyone to come with us. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to transfer off the ship before we leave has my permission. Not one person moved. Sir, Rodriguez said, the Liberty and Resilience are signaling ready for departure. Morrison nodded. 3 ships. 3 human ships against 600 Korthik vessels. But as he looked at his crew, he felt something that the galaxy had forgotten. Hope. Not hope for victory, but hope that doing the right thing mattered, even when the odds were impossible. "Take us out," he ordered. The 3 human ships turned toward the stars, carrying with them the last hope of a distant colony that had asked for help. The Korthic fleet descended on Kethmara like a swarm of metal predators, their dark ships blotting out the stars. General Thakmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, watching the peaceful colony grow larger on his screens. His 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction as he studied the tactical display showing his 600 warships in perfect formation. "Such a beautiful world," he mused to his second-in-command, Colonel Vextar. "It will make an excellent mining operation once we clear away the current inhabitants." The Korthak had perfected the art of conquest over 1,000 years. Their doctrine was simple and effective: overwhelming force followed by complete subjugation. They had destroyed entire civilizations with this method, and today would be no different. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "planetary scans confirm 2 million inhabitants. Their defensive capabilities are minimal: 12 patrol vessels and basic planetary shields." Thakmar's mandibles clicked in amusement. 12 ships against 600. The Zephyrians must be truly desperate to even consider resistance. On the surface of Kethmara, the evacuation was proceeding as quickly as possible. Commander Velinara watched from the command center as streams of civilians moved through the crystal corridors toward the underground shelters. Families carried whatever possessions they could manage, parents lifting small children who did not understand why they had to leave their homes. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Kexlin, "we have 300,000 people still in the outer settlements. The transport ships cannot reach them all before the Korthic arrive." Velinara felt her heart sink. They had known this moment would come eventually. The Korthak had been expanding their territory for decades, consuming world after world. But somehow she had hoped they would have more time. "Do what you can," she ordered. "Save as many as possible." The first wave of Korthak ships entered the system's inner boundary. Their massive dreadnoughts led the formation, each one the size of a small city. Behind them came the heavy cruisers, their hulls bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. The smaller destroyers and frigates formed a protective screen around the capital ships. "Begin scanning for military installations," Thakmer commanded. "I want to know the location of every defensive position on the planet." The Korthic scanning beams swept across Kethmara's surface, penetrating deep into the crystal cities. The technology was so advanced that it could detect individual life signs through layers of rock and metal. Within minutes, they had a complete map of the colony's defenses. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we have located their command center and all defensive positions. Their shield generators are positioned around the capital city." Thakmer studied the tactical display with professional interest. The Zephyrians had built their defenses well, but they were designed to handle small-scale attacks from pirates or raiders, not a full Korthic conquest fleet. "Time to bombardment?" he asked. 4 hours, sir." "Excellent. Send another surrender demand. Give them one final chance to save themselves." The transmission reached Velinara's command center within minutes. Thakmar's image appeared on the main screen, his armored form radiating menace. "Zephyrian colony," his voice boomed through the command center. "This is your final warning. You have 1 hour to surrender completely. Lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Velinara looked around at her officers, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her own hearts. "Sir," Communications Officer Render said quietly, "any response to our distress signal?" "Still nothing," Velinara replied. "We are alone." But even as she spoke those words, something was happening in the depths of space beyond the systems. Edge. 3 small ships dropped out of hyperspace, their human crews running final system checks as they approached the massive Korthik Fleet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, studying the tactical display that showed the overwhelming enemy force. His ship was a heavy cruiser by human standards, but it was smaller than most Korthik destroyers. The plasma cannons that represented humanity's most advanced weapons looked pathetic compared to the firepower arrayed against them. "Contact the Liberty and Resilience," he ordered. Conference call. The screens flickered to life, showing Captain Lisa Chun on the bridge of the UES Liberty and Captain Danny Walsh on the U's Resilience. Chun was a veteran pilot who had earned her command through skill and courage. Walsh was younger, but his crew respected him for his tactical brilliance and unwavering integrity. "Well," Chun said with a grim smile, "this is definitely not what I expected when I joined the space fleet." 600 ships, Walsh added, shaking his head. "Command is going to think we lost our minds," Morrison nodded. "Maybe we did. But those people down there asked for help, and we are the only ones who answered." The three captains studied the tactical situation. The Korthik fleet was massive, but it was also predictable. They had formed a standard conquest formation, with their heavy ships in the center and lighter vessels on the perimeter. It was a formation designed to overwhelm any conventional defense. "They are not expecting us," Chun observed. "Our ships are too small to show up on their long-range sensors. That gives us maybe one chance," Morrison replied. "One surprise attack before they know we are here." Walsh brought up a tactical overlay on his screen. "The command ship is in the center of the formation. If we could disable it, we might disrupt their coordination." "Suicide mission," Chun said bluntly. "We would never make it through their defensive screen." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Human military doctrine was different from most galactic species. Humanity had learned warfare on a planet where resources were limited and enemies were clever. They had developed tactics based on mobility, surprise, and using the environment as a weapon. "What if we do not attack the fleet directly?" he said. "Finally, what if we use the system itself as our ally?" Chun and Walsh leaned forward, interested. "The asteroid belt," Morrison continued. "It runs right through their formation, and that gas giant has a thick ring system. If we use those for cover, we might be able to hit them where they do not expect it." "Guerrilla tactics," Walsh said, with growing excitement. "Hit-and-run attacks using the terrain for cover, exactly. Most galactic species fight in open space ship to ship, but we learned to fight on a world where the environment was part of the battle." The three captains spent the next hour planning their attack. It was desperate, probably hopeless, but it was also the only chance they had to make a difference. Meanwhile, on Kethmara, the bombardment was about to begin. The Korthik fleet had moved into position above the planet, their weapons trained on the crystal cities below. General Thakmer stood ready to give the order that would begin the destruction of another world. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting some unusual sensor readings from the outer system. 3 small contacts, possibly ships." Thakmer glanced at the display with mild interest. "Reinforcements for the colony?" "Unknown, sir. The contacts are very small, possibly civilian vessels. Destroy them if they interfere. We have a schedule to keep." The general turned his attention back to the planet below. In a few hours, the crystal cities would be ruins and the Zephyrian civilization would be nothing more than a memory. It was just another day in the expansion of the Korthik Dominion, but in the depths of space, 3 human ships were preparing to change everything. Captain Morrison looked out at the stars one last time before the battle began. "Remember," he told his crew, "we are not here to win. We are here to buy time for those people down there. Every minute we can give them is a minute more they have to live." The crew of the Defender nodded solemnly. They understood the odds, but they also understood something that the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. And sometimes 3 small ships could change the fate of an entire world. The first plasma beams from the Korthak fleet lit up the night sky above Kethmara like deadly lightning. The planetary shields flickered and sparked as they absorbed the massive energy blasts, their blue glow dimming with each impact, and the Underground shelters. Zephyrian families huddled together as the ground shook from the bombardment above. Commander Velinara stood in the command center, watching the shield strength indicators drop steadily. Western District shields at 60%, reported Lieutenant Kexlin. Eastern Sector holding at 70%. How long can we maintain this? Velinara asked. At current bombardment levels, maybe 2 hours, Kexlin replied grimly. Above the planet, General Fakemur watched the assault with satisfaction. His fleet had formed a perfect bombardment formation, with the heavy dreadnoughts providing the primary firepower while the cruisers and destroyers maintained protective screens. It was a textbook conquest operation, exactly as it had been performed on hundreds of worlds before. Increase bombardment intensity, he ordered. I want those shields down within the hour. The Korthic weapons blazed again, sending streams of plasma and antimatter missiles toward the planet's surface. The shields held, but barely. Crystal spires in the cities below began to crack from the shock waves, but in the depths of space, 3 small human ships were moving through the asteroid belt with deadly purpose. Captain Jake Morrison guided the UES Defender between the floating rocks, using the asteroids as cover from the Korthic sensors. His ship was running silent, all non-essential systems powered down to avoid detection. Target acquired, whispered Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from the tactical station. Korthic destroyer, bearing 2-7-Mark-4. Morrison studied the tactical display. The destroyer was on the edge of the main fleet formation, its crew focused on the bombardment of the planet. They had no idea that death was approaching from the asteroid field. Fire, Morrison ordered quietly. The Defender's plasma cannons erupted. In silence, sending twin beams of superheated energy toward the unsuspecting Korthic vessel. The beams struck the destroyer's rear shields, which flared and collapsed under the unexpected assault. Secondary explosions rippled along the ship's hull as its power systems overloaded. Direct hit, Rodriguez reported. Enemy vessel is dead. In space, but Morrison was already moving, guiding his ship deeper into the asteroid field before the Korthic could react. 1 down, 599 to go, he muttered. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Chun was executing her own attack from the gas giant's ring system. The UES Liberty darted between the ice and rock particles that orbited the massive planet, its smaller size allowing it to maneuver in spaces where larger ships would be destroyed. Multiple targets, reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Kevin. Brooks, 3 Korthic frigates in close formation. Chun smiled grimly. The frigates were focused on their bombardment duties, their shields aligned to protect them from return fire from the planet's surface. They were not expecting an attack from the side. Full spread all weapons, Chun ordered. The Liberty's missile launchers opened fire, sending a wave of nuclear-tipped warheads toward the Korthic formation. The missiles weaved between the ring particles, their guidance systems locked onto the enemy ships. The first frigate exploded in a brilliant flash as its fusion reactor was breached. The second took heavy damage and began to drift out of formation. The third managed to raise its shields just in time to survive, but its weapon systems were destroyed. 3 more ships neutralized, Chun reported over the comm. Moving to secondary position. Captain Danny Walsh and the UES Resilience had the most dangerous mission of all. While the other 2 ships conducted hit-and-run attacks, Walsh was leading a boarding party to capture a Korthic supply vessel. The plan was desperate, but if they could seize control of enemy ships, they might be able to turn the Korthic's own weapons against them. Docking clamps engaged, reported Chief Engineer Sarah Mitchell. We have a hard seal. Walsh looked at the 20 Marines who had volunteered for the mission. They were armed with human weapons and armor, primitive compared to Korthic technology, but they had something the enemy did not expect, the willingness to fight in close quarters. Remember, Walsh told them, Korthic are physically stronger than humans, but they are not used to hand-to-hand combat. Use your speed and teamwork. The Marines nodded and activated their helmet seals. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson led the way. As they cut through the hull of the supply ship and entered the enemy vessel, the interior of the Korthic ship was dark and cramped, designed for their insectoid physiology. The corridors were too low for humans to stand upright, forcing the Marines to move in a crouch. But they advanced steadily, their thermal sensors detecting the heat signatures of the enemy crew. The first contact came at a junction between two corridors. A Korthik warrior rounded the corner, his plasma rifle raised, but Thompson was faster. His assault rifle chattered, sending armor-piercing rounds into the alien's chest. The Korthik fell, his weapon clattering across the metal floor. "Bridges this way," Thompson reported. Following the ship's schematics that their computers had downloaded from captured Korthik databases, the Marines fought their way through the ship, using tactics that no galactic species had employed in centuries. They moved in small teams, covering each other's advance, using grenades and close-quarters weapons to clear rooms. The Korthik crew, trained for space combat, was unprepared for this kind of fighting. Within 30 minutes, the supply ship was in human hands. Walsh stood on the bridge looking at the captured Korthik controls. "Can we operate their weapons?" he asked Chief Mitchell. "Give me 10 minutes," she replied, studying the alien technology. "Their targeting systems are actually simpler than ours." Back on the main Korthik flagship, General Thakmer was beginning to realize that something was wrong. His tactical display showed ships disappearing from his formation, one by one. "Report," he snarled at his tactical officer. "Sir, we have lost contact with 17 vessels. Long-range sensors showed debris fields, but no sign of the attackers." 17 ships? Thakmer's 4 eyes narrowed. "What destroyed them?" "Unknown, sir. The attacks seem to be coming from the asteroid belt and the gas giant's rings." Thakmer studied the tactical display with growing alarm. His fleet was being picked apart by an enemy he could not see. The attacks were too coordinated to be accidents, too precise to be natural phenomena. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the human vessels." "Human vessels?" Thakmer's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of Captain Morrison on the bridge of the Defender. The human looked tired but determined, his uniform torn from the battle. "General Thakmer," Morrison said calmly, "this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Force. You are attacking a peaceful colony that has asked for our protection. Withdraw your fleet immediately, or we will continue to destroy your ships." Thakmer stared at the screen in amazement. "You dare threaten me with 3 primitive vessels?" "We are not threatening you, General. We are promising you every minute. You continue this attack, more of your ships will die. We may not be able to save the colony, but we can make sure you pay a price for destroying it." The transmission ended, leaving Thakmer speechless. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. The general looked at his tactical display again, seeing the gaps in his formation where ships had been destroyed. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we are detecting weapons fire from the captured supply vessel. It appears to be targeting our own ships." Thakmer watched in horror as one of his own vessels opened fire on a nearby cruiser. The familiar green beams of Korthik plasma weapons tore through the cruiser's shields, causing massive explosions along its hull. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Sir, I believe the humans have captured the supply ship and are using it against us." For the first time in his long military career, General Thakmer felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. His fleet was being destroyed by tactics he had never seen, by an enemy that seemed to appear and vanish at will. "All ships, maintain formation," he ordered. "Focus fire on the asteroid belt and ring system. Destroy everything that moves." The Korthik fleet began pouring weapons fire into the asteroid field, trying to flush out the hidden human ships. Rocks exploded in brilliant flashes as plasma beams struck them, but the humans continued their attacks. Using the debris as additional cover, on the surface of Kethmara, Commander Velinara watched the battle through her sensors with amazement. The massive Korthik fleet was in disarray, ships breaking formation to chase shadows in the asteroid field. "Commander," Lieutenant Kexlin said with wonder in his voice, "the bombardment has stopped. The humans are actually holding them off." Velinara could hardly believe it. 3 small ships were fighting 600 Korthic vessels to a standstill. It was impossible, but it was happening. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a message from the human captain." Morrison's face appeared on the screen, his bridge shaking from weapons fire. "Commander Velinara, this is Captain Morrison. We are buying you time, but I do not know how long we can hold them. Get your people to safety." The battle for Kethmara had raged for 6 hours, and the galaxy was watching. Captain Morrison's tactical communications were being monitored by intelligence services across dozens of star systems, and his words were spreading like wildfire through the galactic networks. "This is Captain Morrison to any friendly forces in the region," his voice crackled through subspace transmissions. "We are 3 human ships fighting 600 Korthic vessels to protect a colony that asked for help. We are not asking anyone to join us, but if you are out there and you remember what it means to answer a call for help, we could use you." The first response came from the edge of the Altarian system, where Captain Zorthuk commanded the defense vessel Star Whisper. The elegant energy being had been monitoring the battle with growing amazement as the humans continued their impossible fight. "Bridge crew," Zorthuk announced, his form pulsing with determination. "Prepare for hyperspace jump. We are going to Kethmara." His second-in-command, Commander Learvane, flickered with concern. "Sir, the High Council ordered us to remain in defensive positions." "The High Council made their decision based on military logic?" Zorthuk replied. "But watching these humans fight has reminded me of something we used to be, something we forgot, in our pursuit of safety." The Star Whisper dropped into hyperspace, leaving the safety of Altarian space behind. As it traveled toward the battle, Zorthuk opened a channel to the human fleet. "Human vessels. This is Captain Zorthuk of the Altarian Defense Force. We thought you were insane when we first received the distress call, but watching you fight has reminded us who we used to be before we became too civilized to take risks." "Captain." Morrison's voice came back through the static of battle. "Welcome to the party, Captain. We can use all the help we can get." The second ship to respond was the Granite Confederation Heavy Cruiser Mountain's Edge. Captain Rockmore, the massive stone-like being who commanded the vessel, had been wrestling with his conscience since the distress call first arrived. "Communications." "Officer," Rockmore rumbled, his voice echoing through the stone corridors of his ship, "send a message to the human fleet." The message reached Morrison just as the Defender was completing another attack run through the asteroid field. "Human Captain, this is Captain Rockmore of the Granite Confederation. The Zephyrians helped us during the Plague Wars when our people were dying. We should have come sooner, but we are coming now." More ships began dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The sleek vessels of the Oceanic Alliance, their hulls gleaming like polished shells. The angular craft of the Synthetic Collective, their AI crews processing the tactical situation with mechanical precision. Species that had initially refused to help were now racing to join the battle. Admiral Tiderunner of the Oceanic Alliance opened a channel to all allied vessels. "This is Admiral Tiderunner. We swim together or we sink alone. The humans have reminded us that some things are worth fighting for." General Fakemar watched the growing allied fleet with increasing alarm. His tactical display showed new contacts, appearing every few minutes. What had started as a simple conquest operation was turning into a full-scale galactic war. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we now have 67 enemy vessels in the system. More are arriving every hour." "How is this possible?" Fakemar snarled. "The galactic species are too civilized to fight. They choose diplomacy over warfare." "Sir, the human tactics are spreading to the other ships. They are using the asteroid field and ring system for cover, just like the humans taught them." Fakemar studied the tactical display with growing dread. The Allied fleet was not fighting like any galactic force he had ever encountered. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, they were using hit-and-run tactics, coordinated strikes, and environmental warfare. Captain Chun of the Liberty was leading a mixed squadron of human and Altarian ships through the gas giants' rings. The energy beings had adapted quickly to human tactics, their vessels dancing between the ice particles like living flames. "Target the command cruiser," Chun ordered. "Full spread all weapons." The combined firepower of 6 ships struck the Korthak vessel, overwhelming its shields in seconds. The cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash, taking 40 enemy fighters with it. Meanwhile, Captain Walsh and his marine boarding parties had captured 3 more Korthak vessels. The aliens were completely unprepared for close-quarters combat, and the human marines were teaching their new allies the art of ship-to-ship fighting. Staff Sergeant Thompson led a mixed team of humans and granite warriors through the corridors of a Korthak destroyer. The stone-like beings were natural fighters, their rocky skin providing excellent armor against energy weapons. "Remember," Thompson told his team, "move fast and stay together. The Korthak are strong, but they panic when we get close." The mixed unit fought its way to the bridge, where they found the Korthak crew huddled around their control stations. The aliens surrendered without a fight, their morale broken by the unexpected assault. "Another ship captured," Walsh reported to the growing Allied fleet. "That makes 7 vessels we have taken from the enemy." The captured ships were being turned against their former owners, their familiar weapons causing confusion and fear in the Korthak ranks. Several enemy vessels had fired on their own ships, thinking they were under attack by their allies. On the surface of Kethmara, Commander Velinara watched the battle with amazement. The massive Korthak fleet was in complete disarray, ships breaking formation to chase elusive enemies through the asteroid field. "Commander," Lieutenant Kexlin reported, "the bombardment has stopped completely. The enemy fleet is too busy fighting the Allies to maintain their attack on the planet." Velinara looked at the tactical display showing the growing Allied fleet. Ships from dozens of species were now engaged in combat with the Korthak, their coordinated attacks driving the enemy back. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a message from the human captain." Morrison's face appeared on the screen, his uniform torn and his face streaked with smoke. Behind him, the bridge of the Defender showed signs of battle damage, but his crew was still fighting. "Commander Velinara," Morrison said, "we have bought you some time, but this is far from over. The Korthak still outnumber us 3-1. "Captain," Velinara replied, "I want you to know that the children have been safely evacuated to the deep. Shelters, whatever happens next, you have already saved the most important lives." Morrison nodded grimly. "That is what we came to do, Commander." The transmission ended, but across the galaxy more ships were preparing to join the battle. The human example had awakened something in the galactic community that had been dormant for centuries, the willingness to fight for others, even at great personal cost. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defender, watching the tactical display as more Allied ships dropped out of hyperspace. The odds were still terrible, but they were no longer impossible. "Sir," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, "we have confirmation of Allied fleet strength. 137 vessels from 18 different species." Morrison smiled for the first time since the battle began. "Signal all ships. Prepare for coordinated attack. It is time to show the Korthak what happens when the galaxy stands together." The Allied fleet began to move into attack formation, their mixed technologies and tactics creating a fighting force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human plasma weapons fired alongside Altarian energy beams. Granite mass drivers launched projectiles while Oceanic Alliance vessels released swarms of guided torpedoes. General Thakmer watched the approaching fleet with growing terror. His conquest fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was now outnumbered and outfought by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "perhaps we should consider retreat." Thakmer's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Korthak Dominion had never retreated from a battle, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The humans had not just brought ships to the fight, they had brought something far more dangerous. They had brought hope. "All ships," Thakmer ordered reluctantly, "prepare for strategic withdrawal." But even as the Korthak fleet began to pull back, more Allied ships were arriving. The battle for Kethmara was becoming the largest space engagement in galactic history, and the outcome would determine the future of the galaxy itself. Captain Morrison looked out at the stars, knowing that whatever happened next, they had already achieved something remarkable. They had answered a call for help, and in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy what it meant to stand together against the darkness. The battle for Kethmara had become the largest space engagement in galactic history, with over 200 ships from 23 different species fighting against the Korthic Dominion. The asteroid field was filled with debris from destroyed vessels, and the gas giants' rings glowed with the light of energy weapons. But the cost of victory was becoming clear as the hours passed. Captain Lisa Shun felt the Liberty shudder as another plasma blast struck her ship's failing shields. Her vessel had been fighting for 12 hours straight, and the hull was breached in 17 places. Emergency lighting flickered on the bridge as power systems struggled to maintain basic functions. "Captain," her engineer reported, "we have lost main power to the weapons systems. Backup generators are at 20%. Chun looked at the tactical display showing a group of Zephyrian evacuation transports under attack by Korthek fighters. The civilian ships were defenseless, carrying thousands of children and elderly who had been evacuated from the planet's surface. "Set collision course with the lead Korthek destroyer," she ordered quietly. Her crew looked at her with understanding. They had all known this moment might come. The Liberty was dying, but they could still save lives with their sacrifice. "It has been an honor serving with you, Captain," her tactical officer said. Chun smiled as she gripped the control stick. "Remember to tell them we answered the call?" The Liberty's engines roared to life one final time, pushing the damaged ship toward the Korthik destroyer at maximum speed. The enemy vessel tried to turn away, but it was too late. The collision sent both ships spinning into the gas giant's atmosphere, where they were crushed by the immense pressure. The evacuation transports escaped to safety, carrying their precious cargo of Zephyrian children to the Allied fleet. Captain Danny Walsh watched the Liberty sacrifice from the bridge of the Resilience, his heart heavy with grief. His own ship was in similar condition, with hull breaches on every deck and most of his crew either dead or wounded. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a distress signal from the medical convoy. They are under attack by Korthak cruisers." Walsh looked at the tactical display. The medical ships were carrying wounded from all species, both allied and enemy. According to galactic law, they should have been protected, but the Korthak had never respected such conventions. "All power to engines," Walsh ordered. "We are going to cover their retreat." The Resilience limped toward the medical convoy, its weapons systems barely functional. Walsh knew his ship would not survive another major engagement, but the medical ships carried the wounded who had fought to save Kethmara. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, 3 Korthik cruisers approaching. They have us outnumbered and outgunned." Walsh nodded grimly. "Then we make our shots count." The Resilience opened fire with everything it had, its plasma cannons and missile launchers sending a desperate barrage toward the enemy ships. One cruiser took heavy damage and fell out of formation, but the other 2 continued their attack. "Hull breach on Deck 7, his engineer reported. "We are losing atmosphere." "Seal it off," Walsh ordered. "How long can we hold them?" "Maybe 10 minutes, sir." Walsh looked at the medical convoy, which was slowly pulling away from the battle. 10 minutes might be enough to save them. He opened a channel to his crew. "This is the captain. We are going to hold this position until the medical ships reach safety. I will not order anyone to stay, but I am asking you to help me save those wounded." Not one person left their post. The Resilience fought with the fury of the desperate, its crew manning damaged weapons and repairing systems even as the ship fell apart around them. When the main guns failed, they used backup systems. When the backup systems failed, they used emergency power. The medical convoy reached the safety of the Allied fleet just as the Resilience's reactor finally gave out. The ship drifted powerless in space, its crew having given everything to save others. Captain Jake Morrison watched both sacrifices from the bridge of the Defender, his own ship barely holding together. Most of his crew was dead or wounded, and he was alone on the bridge as his ship continued its desperate fight. "Sir," came a voice over the comm. It was Commander Velinara from the planet's surface. "Captain Morrison, can you hear me?" Morrison looked at the communication panel with tired eyes. "I am here, Commander. I want you to know that we received confirmation from the evacuation fleet. All the children have been safely evacuated. Every single youngling made it to the Allied ships because of what you and your people did." Morrison felt a weight lift. From his shoulders they had done what they came to do. The children were safe. "Thank you, Commander. That is what we came for." "Captain," Velinara continued, "the Allied fleet is asking for your orders. They want to know how to proceed." Morrison looked at the tactical display one more time. The Korthak fleet was finally in full retreat, their command structure shattered by the unexpected resistance. General Fakmer S. flagship was trying to escape the system, but it was surrounded by Allied vessels. "Tell them to let the Korthak go," Morrison said quietly. "We came to save lives, not to destroy them." The order was transmitted to the Allied fleet, and slowly the firing stopped. The Korthak ships limped away into hyperspace, their invasion force broken and their confidence shattered, but the victory had come at a terrible cost. The human fleet had been almost completely destroyed. Only the Defender remained, and it was barely functional. Morrison felt the ship's life support systems failing around him. The bridge was filled with smoke, and he could hear the hull groaning under the stress of battle damage. He activated the emergency beacon and prepared to abandon ship, but even as he prepared for death, rescue ships were already on their way. The Allied fleet had not forgotten the humans who had started this battle, and they were determined to save as many as they could. The rescue came just in time. Medical teams found Morrison unconscious in an escape pod, his body broken but his spirit intact. They worked frantically to save him, using the best medical technology from dozens of species. As Morrison recovered in the medical bay of an Altarian hospital ship, he received visitors from across the galaxy. Admiral Tidrunner of the Oceanic Alliance came to thank him personally. Captain Rockmore of the Granite Confederation brought gifts from his people. Even former enemies came to pay their respects, but it was the message from the Zephyrian children that meant the most to him. Thousands of young voices had recorded a simple message: "Thank you for answering our call for help." 6 months later, Morrison stood before a monument on the rebuilt world of Kethmara. The crystal spire rose high into the sky, its surface engraved with the names of all who had died in the battle. Human names were mixed with Altarian, Granite, and dozens of other species. Commander Velinara stood beside him as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the dedication ceremony. The Korthak Dominion was no longer a threat, their empire having collapsed after their defeat at Kethmara. Other species had learned from the human example, and aggression was no longer met with fear, but with united resistance. "Captain," Velinara said quietly, "do you think it was worth it? The cost was so high." Morrison looked at the monument, then at the rebuilt city around them. Children played in the crystal gardens, their laughter echoing off the towers. The same children who had been evacuated during the battle were now growing up in safety. "Yes," he said simply, "it was worth it." The ceremony began with representatives from each species placing flowers at the base of the monument. But it was the words spoken by the Zephyrian elder that would be remembered across the galaxy. "Today we honor those who answered the call for help. We remember that the strongest species is not the one with the most powerful weapons, but the one that will cross the void to help strangers. We have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite that fear." The monument's inscription was simple but powerful: "In memory of those who answered the call. In honor of those who taught us that help is always possible if someone is willing to give it." As the ceremony ended and the representatives departed, Morrison remained at the monument. The names of his crew were there, along with the names of Captain Chun and Captain Walsh. They had paid the ultimate price. But their sacrifice had changed the galaxy. A young Zephyrian girl approached him, her violet scales shimmering in the sunlight. She looked up at him with large, curious eyes. "Are you the captain who saved us?" she asked. Morrison knelt down to her level. "We all saved each other, little one. That is what people do when someone asks for help." The girl smiled and ran back to her friends who were playing near the monument. Morrison watched them for a moment, then turned and walked away. His work here was done, but somewhere else in the galaxy, someone might be calling for help, and if they did, he would be ready to answer.